I watched her smile at photos from her trip. Something was off. Hours later, the evidence arrived. She thought a trip could hide a double life. I watched Emily step through the door, the golden light from the late afternoon catching the subtle highlights in her hair. Her skin had the kind of glow that spoke of endless sun and warm ocean breezes. I noticed how her shoulders seemed lighter, how her movements carried a sort of effortless grace I hadn't seen in months. She set her suitcase down with casual precision, leaving her phone face down on the kitchen counter. A small detail that immediately unsettled me because she never did that. I told myself it was nothing, just fatigue or the lingering effects of travel. But the sight of it planted a quiet seed of unease. She moved through the apartment with a buoyant energy, unpacking her belongings, smiling at snapshots she had taken, scrolling through them as if each image were a treasure she wanted me to see. I lingered in the doorway, pretending to sip my coffee while secretly watching the way her eyes lingered on the photos, the way her fingers traced the screen. She recounted fragments of her trip, beaches, restaurants, sunrises, sunsets. But something about the way she spoke didn't match the vividness of her expressions. It all seemed rehearsed, polished, almost too perfect. There was an invisible layer, a shadow beneath her enthusiasm that I couldn't place, and I felt my stomach tighten each time she laughed or looked away. The days after her return settled into a routine that seemed normal on the surface. She went about the apartment tidying, cooking, working, arranging her schedule with friends as if nothing had changed. But I began to notice subtle differences that gnawed at me. The shimmer of a bracelet I hadn't seen before. The scent of a perfume that wasn't hers. The expensive creams and lotions lined up in the bathroom. Her wardrobe contained pieces I didn't recognize, delicate fabrics, and bold colors that she had never worn around me. Each small detail by itself could be explained away, but together they started forming a pattern, a puzzle I couldn't ignore. I found myself scrutinizing her in ways I never had before, watching the way she poured coffee, the way she lingered over a text, the way her expression shifted when she thought I wasn't looking. A quiet alarm sounded in my mind, a persistent voice telling me that something was off. I tried to brush it aside, telling myself that I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. But the unease only grew. Every step she took, every glance, every casual smile began to accumulate, building a mosaic of tension and suspicion in my chest. By the end of that week, I realized I was no longer simply observing my wife returning from vacation. I was tracing the outlines of a hidden life, one I had yet to understand. I heard a sharp knock on the door, abrupt and insistent, and when I opened it, Danny was standing there. His eyes were bloodshot, his movements jittery and uncertain, his breathing shallow and uneven. He carried a small stack of photographs and a tablet, the edges of the images peeking out, hinting at secrets I wasn't ready to confront. As he handed them to me, a cold weight settled in my chest, the air thickening, pressing down with an almost physical force. My fingers trembled slightly as I took the first photo, and in that instant, the world as I knew it began to fracture. The images revealed Emily with another man I had never met, a figure carefully concealed from my life. They were in upscale hotels, sitting across candlelit tables, walking along beaches with the kind of ease and intimacy that belonged in a life she had not shared with me. Their hands intertwined, smiles reaching their eyes, touches lingering in ways that made my stomach knot and my mind reel. Each frame I scrolled through layered betrayal upon betrayal. Every laugh she had shared with me now echoing with a hollow, ironic cadence. Memories of vacations, quiet dinners, ordinary mornings, all of them rearranged themselves into a narrative of deception that left me breathless. The tablet showed short videos, shaky at first, but steadily revealing private moments that had never existed for me. I felt a mix of shock and disbelief, a nausea that pulsed through my veins, countered by a strange, numbing clarity. My heartbeat slowed in tandem with a sharp focus that settled over my senses, a cold, methodical part of me waking up. I realized impulsive reactions would be catastrophic. I could not allow rage or grief to control me. Every instinct told me to step back, observe, and catalog every detail, to understand the full scale of the betrayal before any confrontation. As I sat on the edge of the couch, holding the tablet, I traced the contours of their bodies, The way Emily's expressions changed in his presence. The softness in her eyes that had never belonged to me. Each frame was a small avalanche, tumbling over my assumptions, demolishing the foundation of trust I had built over years. The apartment felt suddenly smaller, air thick with tension, and every familiar corner seemed alien, suffused with the echo of hidden moments I had never known. I felt a fracture within myself, the sharp edge of realization that my life had contained a parallel reality I had been blind to. I knew with an unshakable certainty that I had to preserve control. The rage simmered beneath the surface, sharp and insistent, but I forced it down, wrapping it in focus. I needed to understand everything, to collect and document, to watch and measure the breadth of the deception. It was not enough to feel betrayal. I had to map it, confront it on my own terms, and emerge from it with clarity. The images in my hands were not just evidence. They were the blueprint of a hidden life, and I felt the quiet, terrifying weight of the knowledge that nothing would ever be the same again. After the initial shock had begun to dull, I found myself sinking into a strange rhythm, an almost obsessive focus on tracing every detail of Emily's life during those trips. I started with her credit card statements, scrolling line by line, noting each charge at restaurants, boutique hotels, spas, and excursions. The numbers, once innocuous, began to speak a language of betrayal. Each date, each payment, each carefully labeled transaction revealed that these were not simple vacations with friends but meticulously arranged encounters. I cross-referenced hotel bookings with her calendar, marking patterns, tracing weekends that aligned perfectly with charges and locations that had never included me. Her emails offered further proof. I scrolled through months of correspondence, sometimes stumbling on innocuous subject lines that hid the intensity of private exchanges. Attachments of reservation confirmations, screenshots of messages, and confirmations from apps slowly pieced together a timeline of secret meetings. I navigated her cloud storage carefully, almost hesitantly, feeling a mixture of disgust and compulsion. Photos of beaches, dinners, and hotel rooms appeared innocent at first glance, but subtle details. The positioning of bodies, hands touching, the shared laughter, painted a story I had been blind to for too long. I began saving everything meticulously, creating folders named by dates, locations, and the few names I had managed to uncover. Each document, each image, each screenshot was an act of reclaiming power. The process was exhausting, emotionally draining, and at times unbearable, but it granted me a sense of order that my mind desperately craved. Chaos gave way to structure. The numbers, the files, the visual proof formed a lattice of reality I could hold on to, something tangible amidst the intangible betrayal that had threatened to consume me. As I compiled the evidence, I noticed patterns emerging. Weekends always spanning Thursday to Sunday, hotel stays booked under her name alone, transactions that were extravagant yet subtle enough to escape notice. I traced her itineraries, comparing them against social media posts, sporadic messages, and emails, discovering tiny inconsistencies that confirmed the duplicity. Each new finding cut deeper, yet paradoxically strengthened my resolve. Where once I had been paralyzed by disbelief, I now moved deliberately, documenting, analyzing, and preserving. By the end of days that blurred into nights, I had amassed a body of proof that was undeniable. The act of cataloging every piece of evidence was more than just verification. It was a reclamation of control. The horror of betrayal remained, gnawing at the edges of my mind, but amidst it, I found a cold, steady determination. With each file saved, each charge confirmed, I transformed helpless shock into methodical strategy, preparing myself for the confrontation that would inevitably come and the justice I intended to claim. The moment Emily and Danny stood in front of me, the air in the apartment felt thick, heavy, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension of the last 2 years. Emily's expression flickered between defiance, fear, and confusion, and I watched as the carefully maintained facade she had carried for so long began to crumble. Danny's presence was a stark reminder of how far-reaching the deception had been, a living testament to the pain she had caused another family. In his hands, he held more photographs, videos, proof that extended beyond what I had already seen, evidence of affairs, intimate moments, and the meticulous orchestration of a life I had thought we shared. As I sifted through the material he showed me, each image, each frame, cut through layers of denial I had unconsciously built. Every vacation, every anniversary, every small gesture I had treasured now revealed a hidden meaning, a dual narrative running parallel to the life I believed I had. The shock was palpable, but it was tempered by a strange, icy clarity. I felt my emotions pressing against me: grief, anger, disbelief. But I controlled them, allowing only the rational mind to take hold. I cataloged in my head the pieces of evidence, noting patterns, sequences, and repetitions, the symmetry of the deceit that had unfolded without my knowledge. Watching Emily's face transform as she realized that there was no simple excuse, no plausible lie left to tell, I felt a cold detachment settle over me. Her vulnerability was stark, raw, and undeniable. It was a testament to the power of truth when it is incontrovertible, a revelation that left no room for negotiation. I saw the extent of my own loss reflected in her expression and in the stories Danny's evidence told. Everything we had built together, every shared laugh and quiet evening, now existed in a shadowed parallel, one carefully hidden from me. As the confrontation unfolded, I recognized the paradox of control. The more Emily's defenses fell, the more I realized the emptiness beneath the life we had shared. The apartment, once familiar, now felt alien, a stage for the unmasking of deception. I felt the absence of trust like a physical weight, pressing against my chest, but it did not overwhelm me. Instead, it sharpened my focus. Each piece of evidence was a step toward understanding, each observation a measure of strategy. I knew that acting impulsively would only serve the chaos. Measured response and documentation were my only paths forward. By the time the confrontation reached its peak, I was acutely aware of the finality of what had occurred. The past could not be reclaimed, the illusions dismantled, and the trust irreparably fractured. Yet within that devastation, I found a strange, resolute calm. The emotional catharsis of witnessing the truth laid bare allowed me to set aside the raw, uncontrolled anguish and replace it with a meticulous, rational approach. Every decision, every next step would be informed by this clarity, a determination to navigate the aftermath without allowing betrayal to dictate my actions. I held on to the external composure while acknowledging the internal wound, recognizing that the confrontation was both an ending and a beginning. The illusions were gone, replaced by facts that demanded acknowledgement and action. I understood the magnitude of the tragedy I faced, the breadth of the deception, and the necessity of methodical planning to reclaim my life. In the silence that followed the confrontation, I felt a controlled resolve settle over me, a quiet assurance that the next moves I made would be deliberate, calculated, and unshakable. After the confrontation, I realized that reclaiming my life required more than emotional endurance. It demanded precision, structure, and an unwavering strategy. I sought out a family law attorney with a reputation for meticulousness, someone whose presence alone could instill confidence and provide a framework for action. Sitting across from her, I laid out everything: the photographs, the videos, the meticulously organized credit card statements, hotel receipts, messages, and emails. Each piece of evidence was cataloged, cross-referenced, and annotated. I watched as she absorbed the scope of the betrayal, her expression unreadable, yet professional, calculating the best path forward. We developed a step-by-step plan, beginning with the formal filing for divorce, specifying grounds that would allow the court to recognize not only the infidelity, but also the misuse of joint assets. I learned to see each document as a tool, each filing as a move in a game where preparation and foresight could turn chaos into control. I spent hours compiling financial statements, tracing expenditures, calculating the total cost of the hidden affairs, and preparing an organized portfolio that left no room for ambiguity. The process transformed my previously uncontainable grief into meticulous, deliberate action. Mediation was scheduled on neutral ground, and I prepared for it as if entering a battlefield. I reviewed every number, every timeline, every piece of correspondence that proved the scope of deceit. I rehearsed the sequence of facts in my mind, ensuring that each argument I presented would be precise and unassailable. The act of preparation became almost therapeutic. Every calculation and every organized folder reminded me that despite the emotional devastation, I had regained control over my next steps. The legal strategy extended beyond the filing itself. I worked with my attorney to anticipate potential arguments, to prepare for the inevitable attempts to minimize, deny, or manipulate the narrative. I learned to separate emotion from evidence, focusing solely on verifiable facts. Each legal consultation reinforced the notion that my power lay not in confrontation but in preparation, in turning raw betrayal into actionable intelligence. I felt the cold satisfaction of structure forming where once there had been chaos. In those weeks, I watched the transformation within myself. The initial shock, the anger, the disbelief, all had begun to coalesce into a disciplined, rational approach. I no longer felt helpless. I was directing the course of events with clarity and precision, organizing evidence, filing motions, reviewing statements, and preparing for mediation became acts of reclaiming agency. The tangled web of deceit that had threatened to unravel my life was now dissected, cataloged, and converted into a plan that I controlled. By the time the first legal meeting concluded, I understood the full weight of what I had achieved. The chaos that had once consumed me was now structured, every step intentional, every action measured. The emotional wounds remained, but they were tempered by a sense of mastery over circumstance. I had transformed my pain into strategy, my disorientation into clarity. In reclaiming control over the legal process, I had taken the first concrete steps toward reclaiming my life, understanding that true strength lay in the combination of evidence, preparation, and unwavering focus on the end goal. The divorce was finalized, and with the legal proceedings behind me, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The house was officially mine, the accounts settled, and the reimbursement accounted for. Yet the quiet of the space no longer felt entirely like home. I began to rebuild slowly, layer by layer, letting the routines of daily life fill the void left by betrayal. Work became a refuge and a source of renewed purpose. I immersed myself in new projects, long-term plans, and small achievements that reminded me of my competence and capacity to shape my own world. It was during this period of rebuilding that I met Lisa. Her presence was gentle yet steady, someone who did not rush me into emotions I was not ready to face, but who offered understanding and respect for the journey I had endured. With her, I experienced a companionship rooted in authenticity rather than illusion. Our time together was calm, deliberate, and affirming. It reminded me that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt slowly, not as a continuation of the past, but as something entirely new, unburdened by previous deceptions. I'd also nurtured a cautious, measured relationship with Danny. The shared experience of betrayal had forged an unlikely understanding between us, a solidarity born not of friendship but of parallel pain and mutual acknowledgement of wrongs endured. Our interactions were structured around civility and careful boundaries, a stabilizing presence that underscored the necessity of clarity and honesty in all future connections. Through this, I understood that reconciliation did not always mean intimacy. Sometimes it meant respect for the lives we each carried forward. Over months, the rhythm of my days began to center me. I paid attention to small details: morning sunlight on the porch, the calm hum of traffic as I drove to work, the quiet satisfaction of an organized desk and completed tasks. Emotional scars remained, reminders of lessons learned, but they no longer dictated my responses. I could reflect on the past without being consumed by it, recognizing betrayal as a catalyst for self-awareness and personal growth rather than the defining element of my life. In building a new life, I reclaimed not only physical and financial space, but also psychological territory. I created structures and routines that reinforced my sense of security and independence. Lisa's presence, along with my disciplined approach to work and daily life, provided balance, a sense that I could enjoy the present without the shadows of the past encroaching. My sense of power shifted inward, from control over others to control over my own responses, my own trajectory. By the time I fully settled into this new rhythm, I recognized the depth of my own resilience. The end of my marriage, once a source of profound devastation, had become a turning point. I no longer sought revenge or validation. I sought harmony, integrity, and the quiet satisfaction of living a life defined by my own choices. The house, the career, and the legal victories were tangible. But the true victory was internal. A steady, deliberate peace that allowed me to look forward without glancing back. I understood at last that strength lay not in retaliation, but in the patient creation of a life that could endure, grow, and flourish free from deception. A life in which trust, purpose, and self-respect were rebuilt from the ground up.